Hello, Kingdom people. Welcome to Renew. We're having a kind of an apologetic seminar here. That's what it feels like, anyways. We're reviewing Bart Ehrman's essay in Newsweek. What can we know about Jesus? What can we really know about Jesus? And this is part 4 of our critical assessment of that. So here's the thing that needs explaining. We know that in the 30s there's this band of Jews who go out into the Roman Empire, and they're preaching that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God. And they mean by that, he's the very embodiment of Yahweh, as N.T. Wright says. They have faith in Jesus, they pray to Jesus, they worship Jesus, and what's most peculiar is that the Jesus that they're praying and worshiping is this fellow contemporary of theirs, a fellow Jew, a fellow human being. And if there's anything that's contrary to the Orthodox faith of a Palestinian Jew in the first century, it's that a human being could be God, and that a human being could be worshipped and prayed to. And so the question is what explains this? And these folks are willing to die for this. I mean, they watch their kids be fed to lions, eventually, under the persecution of Nero. So what explains this? Now, they give us their explanation. They say it's the life he lived and the miracles that he did, and that he died and rose from the dead. And if that's true, if their presentation of Jesus in the Gospels is true, we can understand how they might have come to this radical conclusion. If that's not true, then what is? What's the alternative explanation? Because it's got to have some explanation. Either you have to end up, if it's not true, it's false. And if it's false, it must be either intentionally false or unintentionally false. They're either preaching a lie or they're preaching a legend. Yesterday, I tried to refute the idea that it could be a lie. And today, I'll address the issue of whether it could possibly be a legend. Now, before I get into that, I should say this. One could legitimately say, look, why does it have to be all one way or the other? I mean, maybe it's a combination of deception and history, or legend and history, and that's fair enough. On a strictly historical basis, you can't prove that there is no deception and no legend in the Gospels. But all you can show in history, at least I think what I believe you can show, what Paul Eddie and I argue in the Jesus legend, is that it's substantially reliable. It's substantially history. And so if I was going to nuance this thesis, I'm painting it with very broad strokes, I know, but look, I only got like 8 minutes on these things, so I got to rush it. But if I was to nuance it, I would say it's either substantially historical or substantially lie and or substantially legend. And that's all I need for my faith. My faith wouldn't be affected at all if it turns out that there's some exaggeration or some deception or some legend that crept in the Gospels. That doesn't affect. All I need to believe is that it's substantially reliable. And that's all I'm arguing for now. So could it be substantially legendary? I believe that's a very hard thesis to pull off. Now, the book that Paul Eddie and I did, The Jesus Legend, is 427 pages long, about a third of its footnotes. So what I'm going to give here is very much the tip of the iceberg. I encourage you to get the book or the smaller version, Lord or Legend, which is sort of the pop version of that. There's 6 considerations that I think rule out the possibility that the Gospels are substantially legendary. Okay, six things. Number 1, you really don't have enough time. I mean, legends typically take time to develop, to grow. But in this case, overnight, they're preaching that Jesus is this resurrected, miracle-working Son of God. This isn't a story that's told long, long ago and far, far away. James, the brother of Jesus, is in the crowd, all right? He's one of the disciples. And so you just don't have enough time for a legend to get off the ground. Second thing, there are too many checks and balances for a legend to get off the ground. These folks are preaching this right after Jesus lived, and they're preaching it originally in the same vicinity that they claim Jesus lived and did these miracles and things like that. If it didn't happen, if it's a legend, it'd be the easiest thing in the world to point out. And there are plenty of people around who wanted to point it out. The Orthodox Jews saw Christianity as this terrible heresy, and they were motivated to point it out. And so it'd be very hard for a legend to grow up in that environment. But you also have to ask the question, how could the disciples end up believing this if it's a legend? James, the brother of Jesus, how would he believe a legend about his brother? In fact, the indication is that he really didn't believe until after the resurrection. The Gospels have him and Mary going out they thought, Gospels admit, this is one of the signs that they're telling the truth, they don't try to hide this sort of thing, that James and Mary thought Jesus was beside himself, and they were afraid he was going to get himself crucified, so they went out and tried to bring him home. And that's when he said, no, my brothers and sisters are those who are doing the will of God and listening to me. It was only after the resurrection that James converted, but that's remarkable that James, the brother of Jesus, did convert. He would not be one that'd be very inclined to think that, to believe a legend about his brother. The third thing is that the disciples, they claim to be eyewitnesses. Okay, so for example, listen to this. This is in 1 John. That which was from the beginning, which we have heard, which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked at, and our hands have touched, this we proclaim is concerning the word of life. The life appeared, and we have seen it and testify of it, and we proclaim to you this eternal life, which was with the Father and has appeared to us. We proclaim to you what we have seen and heard, so that you also may have fellowship with us, and our fellowship is with the Father and His Son, Jesus Christ. 7 times you have John emphasizing that they saw, they heard, they touched. They're claiming to be eyewitnesses. And so we're now back to either John is telling the truth or he's lying, and that puts us back in the lie hypothesis, which I think I adequately refuted yesterday. And so the legendary thesis just doesn't work because in the end it falls back to being the lie hypothesis. The fourth thing is this: Jewish culture is just not a conducive environment for a legend to form. Certainly not a legend about a Messiah. Certainly not about a legend about the Messiah in first century Palestine. The Jews were in close proximity in some quarters with the Greeks, and the Greeks told a lot of stories about the gods becoming a human being and interacting with human beings, and they fused divinity and humanity a lot. And for that reason, the Jewish folks, on the whole, there are a few exceptions, but on the whole, they were very resistant to legends and stories and mythology. And so this is not a conducive environment for legends to arise. There's other cultures that are very conducive to legend making. But Jewish culture in the first century Palestine is not one of them. The fifth thing is that if the Jews were going to have a legend grow up in their environment, it would not have looked like this one. I see, the thing is, legends typically, they confirm social norms. And usually when social norms are being disrupted, legend plays a reaffirming role. They conform to social mores, especially when they're being threatened. The story that the gospel authors tell not only does not conform to the Jewish norms, it flies in the face of them. I mean, it's at every turn, it is exactly what you would not expect from a legend about a Messiah in the first century. I mean, for example, as I've already mentioned, they're worshiping and praying to a man. That is countercultural in the extreme. Their Messiah gets crucified. If you're going to tell a story, a legend about a Messiah in first century Palestinian culture, he doesn't get crucified. The Messiah was supposed to be victorious, was supposed to defeat the Romans. This is the last thing you would expect a Messiah to do. Well, not quite the last thing. The last thing you expect the Messiah to do is to, on the cross, cry out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" That's, if there's going to be a legend that's going to be arising in first century Palestine about a Messiah, he's not going to be crying out on a cross, being victimized by the Romans, my God, why have you forsaken me?" So it would not have looked like this. There's a number of features here that just don't conform to what we would expect from a legend by Jews in first century Palestine. And the final thing, is that they just don't read like legends. C.S. Lewis said this famous quote of his in God in the Dock. He says, "As a literary historian, I am perfectly convinced that whatever else the Gospels are, they are not legends. I've read a great deal of legend, and I am quite clear that they are not the same sort of thing." They just lack the kind of qualities that you normally get with legends. I'll just give 2 short examples of this. We go on and on about this in the Jesus legend. But on the one hand, they have superfluous detail all over the place. There's all sorts of detail that doesn't contribute to the storyline. It's the kind of thing that you get from eyewitnesses or eyewitness reports, but you don't typically get in legend. For example, read John 20, where it has Peter and John running to the tomb to check out the empty tomb story. There's all sorts of detail about who ran faster, who got there first, and then they had to crouch down to get into the tomb, and the clothes were folded in a certain way, and some clothes were thrown in the corner. All this detail that really doesn't contribute to the storyline. Or Mark, he sometimes when he's describing Jesus' teaching, he'll note that he gazed around the crowd before he spoke. He stared down the crowd. A little detail. That's just, there's all sorts of stuff like that. What's really interesting, and this is the second point I'll make, is that a lot of the detail is counterproductive. It does not contribute to the storyline. It's the kind of thing you think they would edit out. If it was a legend or if they were fabricating a story, this is the kind of thing that you would expect to be deleted. So, for example, I just mentioned, my God, why have you forsaken me? That's a detail that you would think that they would have edited out. Or the disciples are consistently looking dull. In legends, usually the founders of a religion or a movement are heroic. They're superstars. But in the Gospels, they actually come out as rather dull. They don't get it. They're knuckleheads. Women are at the tomb. The first ones to discover the tomb empty are the women. Women in first century Jewish culture had zero credibility. They weren't allowed to testify in court unless there was a man to corroborate their story. They were considered to be liars, and yet it's women who discovered Jesus at the tomb. That's not what you'd expect from a Jewish legend. And where are the guys while this is happening? Oh, they're scared. They're hiding. The women are the ones who've got the. Never mind. You've got Messiah being crucified. I already mentioned that. Some of Jesus' teachings have details that you'd expect that. They're just odd. You'd think that they would leave them out. Jesus calls a Syrophoenician woman a dog. Oh, we can explain that, I think, but the fact is you have to explain it. It's not what you'd expect from a legend. Or at one point he says, "Why do you call me good?" When a guy says, "Good master, what should we do?" "Why do you call me good?" That's not what you'd expect. Those are the kind of things that confirm that you're dealing with actual history here. So what does that bring us to? It can't be a lie. At least it can't be substantially a lie. And I don't think it can be substantially legend, which leaves only the possibility that it's substantially rooted in history. And again, you can't prove on a historical basis that there's no legend in it or that there's no exaggeration or deception in it. But I don't need that to ground my faith. What we need is for the Gospels to be substantially reliable. And I think as they're assessed by all the normal standards that you'd assess ancient documents by, they give us every reason to believe that, in fact, they are substantially reliable. So that's the general overview of the Gospels. Now what we'll start to deal with tomorrow or whenever the next video blog is shown is Bart Ehrman's critical assessment of the infancy narratives. The fact that the infancy narratives are in Gospels that give us reasons to believe they're generally reliable should incline us to think that they too are reliable. But we'll have to assess those on an independent basis. And that's the task for the next video blog. Until then, God bless you. Have a great day. Live in love as Christ loved you and gave his life for you. Amen. Bye-bye.